The shooting range. In this episode, pages of history. Her Majesty's Red Army Men. Tactics and strategy. A new high-precision weapons and using them with your squad. And metal beasts. An American glass cannon. This time we're looking at a new American light tank placed at BR 9.7. It has an acronym HSTV-L instead of the name, which transforms into High Survivability Test Vehicle Lightweight. The designers were probably a bit too confident about the high survivability part, but the combination of a groundbreaking weapon system, a powerful gas turbine engine, and compact size definitely deserves some attention. The weapon here is a 75mm cannon with elevation angles from -17 to +45 degrees, equipped with a two-plane stabilizer and an autoloader. Additional equipment includes 2 machine guns, a thermal sight, and smoke launchers. There are 3 crew members. The driver and the gunner are located in the front of the hull, and the commander is in the turret. The rear part of the tank is occupied by the engine and transmission, while the ammunition is stored in the central part of the vehicle. At a brief glance, this looks like a classic light tank, a nimble and extremely agile machine, always capable of reaching important positions before others. That doesn't sound like something that can stand against Tier 6 and 7 MBTs, does it? But this test vehicle has another trump card. An unusually powerful weapon system which turns a simple light tank into an incredible glass cannon. The caliber isn't very large, and there's only one type of ammo, but would you look at the fire rate? The first stage ammo stowage containing 6 APF-SDS rounds reloads in just 1,500 milliseconds. That means you can fire 3 or 4 times while most of your enemies are still reloading. The key is not to let these shots go to waste. The round pierces 262 millimeters of armor from half a kilometer away. And it's not enough just to stand and shoot at the general direction of your opponent. You'll have to be methodical about doing it. Find the target's weak point, flank it, break its gun, deprive it of movement, and finally, destroy it. When you run out of the first 6 rounds, the reload will take quite a long time, so this machine shows its best if you're cautious. Those who like playing on French tanks with drum autoloaders will find a soulmate in this vehicle. Basically, it goes like this. Find a target, get rid of it, then find a safe place to reload. Another upside is you don't need to dwell on how many rounds to take into battle. With this machine, you always take as much as possible. You aren't likely to survive an enemy attack anyway, unless their projectiles ricochet off you, thanks to the huge angles of your armor. In any case, your survivability doesn't depend on whether you have a lot of ammo or not. Another thing worth mentioning is your gun depression angle. The whole 17 degrees. Not many tanks on tiers 6 and 7 will be able to compete with you on difficult terrain. Moreover, at places like that you can use a lot to your advantage. Huge horizontal aiming speed, small size, and the flat turret. That lets you easily hide from retaliatory fire. When the British ships were entering the port of Arkhangelsk on the 31st of August 1941, a fierce battle between Soviet and German fighters broke out over them. The Germans wanted to sink the convoy at all costs. And for the Soviet side, it was a matter of honor to protect the British transport ships. After all, Britain had sent not only aircraft, but also pilots of the 151st Wing of the Royal Air Force to help their Soviet colleagues master the famous Hurricanes. People on the shore were watching them with great tension.
What are they like, these British people? Will it be possible to find any common ground with them?
But then, one of the German fighters caught fire and fell into the sea, and they heard a roaring "Goal!" shouted by multiple voices from the decks of the British transport ships. Oh, they were clearly soulmates. It was no accident that this incredible cooperation between Soviet and British pilots began exactly with football.
Simple lads from Moscow and London, Novosibirsk and Manchester, Novgorod and Edinburgh were splitting into teams, and the landing gear stands of the MiG-3 and a Hurricane, placed opposite each other on the runway, turned into goalposts.
You wanted to practice teamwork and overcome the language barrier? Well, there you go. Plus, these British pilots had already fought through the Battle of Britain, only instructing and no fighting the Germans? Oh, they wouldn't have that. And when Lieutenant Ross's flight, escorted by Zakhar Sorokin's MiG-3, took off for familiarization patrol, no one among the German pilots expressed any desire to fight them. They were so puzzled by the sight of mixed flight formation of fighters with British and Soviet identification marks that they dived and took off towards Finland, just in case. As early as on September the 22nd, the newest Soviet PE-2 bombers, escorted by Hurricanes, very successfully delivered some explosive presents to one of the airfields in occupied Norway. The German fighters tried to intercept them, didn't get a single chance to break through to the bombers. According to the memories of those who witnessed the battle, the combat training of the British pilots was beyond praise. However, the Soviet pilots also had something to pass on to their colleagues. First of all, they taught them how to take off and land, even in a snowstorm. The British were also amazed by how fast the local pilots were mastering the Hurricanes, while the British themselves, having tried the I-16, quickly came to the conclusion that that thing was impossible to fly at all. Something you wouldn't say about the MiG-3, though. The guests liked it a lot. Wouldn't it be nice to have a squadron or two of such high-speed fighters in the RAF to intercept high-altitude Luftwaffe scouts in the British skies? Of course, the first victories brought the first losses. The Germans were rushing to Murmansk, and Soviet and British fighters were constantly flying to intercept the bombers. There was less and less need for interpretive assistance. 151st Wing Commander Henry Ramsbottom Isherwood and 78th Fighter Aviation Regiment Commander Boris Safonov knew that the Luftwaffe would do anything to destroy this international combat fraternity. But that's a story for one of the future episodes. The new update added a couple of fresh mechanics for high-precision weapons into the game. For example, setting a bombing target point, available, for instance, on the American F-4E or, say, the Swedish Build 2 ATGM, that can hit even covered enemies, as well as the German Pars ATGM that you can just launch and forget about. At the same time, there's a new feature for squads. Now you can designate a target for the members of your squad that will be clearly visible from the ground as well as from the sky. The most attentive of our players have immediately linked these mechanics together, and they were quite right. Indeed, they show their best in combination, and today we'll talk about how you can do just that. First, let's look at the controls. You can find the target point options in the multi-function menu, In the cockpit section, numbers 2 and 3 correspond to the activation and deactivation of the target point. In case you've forgotten, you can open the menu itself by pressing the left stick on the consoles or the Y button on the keyboard. If you prefer assigning separate buttons rather than using the menu, you can do so in Control, Aircraft, Camera Control. Next, let's go to the Common tab and assign a button for Set Target for Squadron. Done. Now we need a friend to play with us in the squad, of course. For the first battle, we'll pick the Americans. We accumulate points on the Abrams and then switch to the Phantom with bombs. The ally stays on the ground to designate the target for us. But first, we stay at high altitude and away from the main fights to avoid anti-aircraft guns. We also wait for intel from our partner. At some point, a yellow marker appears on the map. Our ally indicates that there is an enemy anti-aircraft gun there. All right. We aim at the marker and activate the target point. Then return to horizontal flight and there's another marker on the screen now. It shows where we need to fly in order to successfully drop the bombs. Upon approaching, we hold the drop button and watch the bombs detach from the pylons on their own and hit the target after a few seconds. In the next battle, we'll take the German Tiger UHT helicopter with Pars ATGMs. First, once again, we accumulate enough points to fly on the helicopter. Then we take off and wait for our teammate to give us a command. There's the mark from our mate at last. We look out from behind our terrain cover, immediately facing the right direction. We lock onto the target, launch the ATGM, and immediately hide back. The missile will do the rest on its own. Of course, you can use similar tactics without using the help of your squad mates, but it will take more time to find a target on your own, and that way, your chances of being spotted by an enemy radar are much higher. The last battle for today, and we switch nations once again. Let's take the Swedish STRF 9056 light tank with its unique Build 2 ATGM. It has a proximity fuse as well as an overfly top attack ability, which makes the warhead trigger exactly above the enemy's roof. That also means that the cumulative jet goes not forward but down, perpendicular to the direction of the missile. This allows you to damage even those enemies who hid their hull and turret behind a small obstacle. Now, how can we find them? That's right, with a little help from our friends in the squad and their target markers. There we go. Of course, those examples are far from representing all the situations in which the new markers and high-precision weapons can work effectively in pairs. So, team up with your friends, experiment, and share your experiences in the comments. And we move on to answering your questions. The first question was sent by a player called Front. Can you make War Thunder replay files from older versions playable? That one is hardly possible, unfortunately. The replay as a concept is not just a video file. It's a certain sequence of player actions that the game recreates, and they always lead to the same result. But when an update changes even the smallest in-game mechanism, which happens all the time, that means that those very same actions will start causing a different response from the game. As a result, the replay will not reflect the original situation anymore, and that's why the replays from older versions aren't supported. Crimson Scopes asked, will you be able to do a jet fighter triathlon? I would really like to see which is better, MiG-15 or F-86? Indeed, there's enough jet fighters of different nations in the game already, so we can very well organize that competition someday. We'll see what we can do. Then there is a question sent by Cole Higginson. Can you make a video on how to set up keybinds? I don't know what to set them up as. In our settings, you can find several types of basic presets that we thought to be comfortable enough. Still, it all highly depends on what type of vehicles you prefer playing on and what in-game mechanics you rely on the most. Obviously, those are the ones that you should bind to the most comfortable buttons. Also, don't forget about the multifunction menu. It's quite possible that when you get used to it, you won't need to bind anything anymore at all. Mr. Wolf wants to know, when will you put more armor on the Italians? Hi there. One of the main things that distinguishes our game from thousands of others is that we don't make up some abstract in-game units using our imagination. We take the existing information on real machines and recreate it using official documents and other reliable sources. So, we can't give more armor to a certain machine or equip another one with a gun that it didn't have in reality. Another question comes from Alexander. Hey, are you using players for the triathlon or AI? Only players, always. For us, this is the only right way to get authentic results in the competitions. And the last message for today was written by Chin. War Thunder makes me want to design a tank of my own. Hey, that's quite possible, by the way. Not only can you design your own machine, you can also add it into the game. We've developed the content development kit exactly for that purpose, and it allows our players to make their own camouflages, maps, missions, and models of various machines. Also, there's the revenue share program. That means that we, share the revenue with the authors. For example, in the recent update, we've added the Scimitar F1 two-engine fighter, which was designed by one of our players, called Nova A29R. So if you want to, go for it. Once again, that's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, which premieres every Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell, leave a like, stay safe, and keep calm. The summer is already here. See you in a week.